Colton's most cherished item was his Mustang, which he loved. He would maintain it spotless by cleaning and shining it every weekend. Evelyn, his daughter, was playing close by while he cleaned the car one Saturday morning. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Muses. Sometimes I still hear my little girl scream at night, remembering the horrific event. Daddy, be careful. Evelyn shed a tear. She had no idea that she was going to save herself from a terrible situation. It was too late when her panicked yell was heard by her father. Though who would believe her when she said she couldn't manage it alone? She was in complete shock at what she had just seen happen to her father. A method has to exist. Evelyn was unaware at the time that her home security camera had captured the whole incident, which ultimately proved to be quite helpful. If not, nobody would have taken it seriously. However, what was the fate of Colton, and how could Evelyn assist him? Colton made the decision to drive his Mustang first thing on Saturday morning and wash it afterwards. Evelyn asked to go with him as she raced after him. Evelyn argued she had grown and even had her booster seat ready, but Colton normally said no, citing her tiny size as a reason for not being able to ride in the front seat. Colton was unable to resist his daughter in his current state of mind. Oh, he gave her a front row seat. Evelyn was sad to go home after their drive since she had enjoyed every second of it. When they returned, Evelyn laughed heartily as she snatched up her scooter and began riding up and down the street. As he cleaned his car, Colton watched her closely. Her laughing was audible in the background, but he was so concentrated on getting his Mustang clean that he forgot to check on Evelyn for a while. It was Evelyn's cry at that point. Panicked, Colton turned to face the possibility of what had transpired. His daughter's terrified expression contorted as she pointed at something on the ground. She said, "Daddy, look out!" A beat skipped by Colton's heart. His daughter was pointing at something he had no knowledge about. With all the soapy water, he was unable to see anything on the ground when he glanced down. "Daddy, behind you! Daddy!" Evelyn let out another cry. Frantically, she gestured to the floor. "How come? Where?" Colton answered. It was too late for Colton to see what Evelyn was pointing at, so he hastily sprang up and down. He lost his balance while jumping up and down because his foot slid on the soapy water. Evelyn was horrified to see her father stumble and bang his head on the sidewalk. There was still danger near her father, so she cried and yelled at him to get up. However, Colton heard Evelyn's screams become progressively softer as he lay there, stunned and wounded. Evelyn realized she needed to get her dad out of danger. She glanced carefully at the threat and hurried to him. He was too heavy for her to get away, even as she pulled at his arm. Would that Evelyn's mom could come home? Though it remained silent, Evelyn called out for assistance, hoping that one of their neighbors would hear her. Evelyn's only thought was on getting her father back. The risky circumstance no longer concerned her. Grabbing both of his hands, she pulled again. This time she saw that her father's body was moving somewhat. The danger had not yet passed, but she managed to shift her father onto the grass by pulling one more time. Her father's severe bleeding made for a terrifying sight. Evelyn sprang to her feet and hurried inside, looking for a phone. Fortunately for Evelyn, she was just running inside when her father's phone rang. Her mother was phoning. She took up the phone fast and started screaming for her mother to come home. Her mother started to say, "Hey, darling," but Evelyn cut her off. "Mom, you need to get home right now. Daddy is injured." Evelyn shed a tear. The frantic screams of her daughter shocked Evelyn's mother, but she wasted no time in driving home. She entered a horrifying sight there. She realized she needed to contact 911 as soon as she spotted her husband laying on the ground near a small pool of blood and soapy water. Evelyn's father had passed out completely by the time the paramedics came. As soon as they realized what had happened, they hastily placed him on a stretcher. Driving to the hospital, Evelyn and her mother trailed the ambulance. Upon arriving at the hospital, Evelyn and her mother inquired about Colton's room and were shocked to discover he was transferred to the surgery room. His head wound was so large that they had to do an emergency surgery. Colton was still in the operation room hours later. A doctor finally showed up after what felt like a lifetime, but he didn't appear to have good news. There was something unsettling about him, and his expression seemed dejected. "Woman Dirkhouse?" he inquired. "Indeed, physician. What's happening?" She answered in a voice that was shaking. "I apologize to Mrs. Dirkhouse. But the procedure is taking longer than expected. There have been some issues, and we need to decide on something really important. We must get your consent because your spouse is unconscious." Evelyn's mom was taken aback. "Permission to do what?" she cautiously inquired. Colton's life was in jeopardy, the doctor said, and they didn't have many alternatives left. They still had one option, but it would need an experimental procedure. The likelihood of Colton's survival would be uncertain. Why weren't the usual treatments able to rescue him? What had transpired to get him to this state? With concern in her eyes, she turned to face Evelyn. "Sweetheart, perhaps the doctors might rescue Daddy if you told them what had happened to him. Please give it a go for your father. I know it's difficult." Evelyn truly wanted to support her father, but at that moment, talking about that terrible event was out of the question. It was simply too terrifying. However, she saw the significance of making an attempt. She then informed the doctor that she wished to try telling him, but in a private setting. After assessing Evelyn's condition, the physician led her into a vacant room. They spent a few minutes in that chamber, leaving Evelyn's mother in the waiting area outside. The door opened and the doctor hurried out after 10 or 15 minutes. He made no attempt to look or talk to Evelyn's mother. Rather, he raced past her directly into the surgery room. Her mother questioned, "Evelyn, what happened?" "Mom, I succeeded. I informed him about the events. Do you think well of me?" Although Evelyn's mother was extremely proud, she was still unaware of what had actually transpired. A physician hurriedly left the room. "We succeeded," he said. "The operation is complete, but Colton remains unconscious and is in a stable condition." Though Evelyn and her mother were relieved, the situation wasn't quite finished. "Is he visible to us?" Evelyn inquired. "After a short while," the physician answered. After waiting patiently in room 11 with her mother, Evelyn noticed a significant change in Colton's appearance. The hardest part wasn't over yet, though, since he said something unexpected the next time he saw his wife and kid. "Who are you?" Confused, Colton inquired. "Darling, what do you mean? Do you not recall us?" Evelyn's mother inquired, her anxious eyes on the physician. "Is this normal, Doc?" However, the physician appeared to be as perplexed as the rest of us. At last, the doctor remarked, "Please follow me outside. There, I'll go over everything." The doctor informed Evelyn and her mother outside the room that this reaction was normal and that it most likely occurred during surgery to repair his head injury, though it might possibly have been the result of a concussion. Though he wasn't sure, he was unable to respond when asked if Colton's memory would ever return. Evelyn was heartbroken. Even her own father had lost sight of her. He had no idea what he was doing, and recovering his memory would take a while. They put forth a lot of effort to win Colton's confidence once more. They told him stories about their past activities together and brought picture albums to the hospital. Evelyn retrieved the books he used to read to her and showed him her beloved stuffed animals. Gradually, Colton began to transform. After spending a month and a half in the hospital, Colton needed around a month to regain his memory. At that point, he was prepared to return home. However, there remained one unresolved question. Evelyn's mother was unaware of what had transpired that terrible day because she was preoccupied with her husband's memory loss and her attempts to reverse it. However, Evelyn and the physicians knew the answer. Thus, when Colton was preparing and packing for his last day at the hospital, Evelyn's mother approached the physician and at last inquired about what her daughter had mentioned to him 15 months prior. When Evelyn turned to face her father after telling the doctor she had been playing with her scooter while he cleaned the car, she observed something moving on the ground. A very toxic snake was hiding in what she believed to be the garden hose swishing about in the water. Colton was bitten by the snake in his ankle, and the poison entered his circulation. However, the physicians were clueless as to why his organs were failing throughout the procedure because they were unaware that he had been bitten. They didn't realize they needed to give him a blood transfusion in order to preserve his life until Evelyn informed them about the snake. And they were just in time, since instead of a celebration, There would have been a burial if the poison had continued to spread throughout his body. They had no intention of staying near the spot where Colton nearly perished or near any snakes. Colton and his family decided to relocate when he healed completely. They relocated to a tranquil area in a different state, perhaps away from any venomous snakes. Dr. Robert Stevens promised to pick up his wife Florence from her doctor's appointment in an hour on August 3, 1975, in Montello, New York. It never occurred to him that this would be his last encounter with her. Florence never left the workplace. She simply disappeared, leaving her husband perplexed and a mystery that would stump detectives for almost 40 years. Florence Stevens, a 36-year-old lady full of life and eager for new adventures, was a vivacious and adventurous person. She was employed at the busy Catskill Mountains Resort, which drew guests from all over the world. Florence was lively, but she wasn't immune to the common problems of life. She had the illness on that fateful August evening. Robert, her husband, made the decision to take her to the doctor so that she could get the treatment she needed. The tranquil beauty of the mountains and the reassuring regularity of small-town life surrounding the couple's modest living in the Catskills. Robert waited eagerly for her return after dropping her off at the doctor's office. The hours stretched into a lifetime while he waited for her to return. He began to feel a rising feeling of dread as the evening went on. Florence had vanished from view. As he circled around, went to the clinic, and searched the neighborhood, desperation set in. However, Florence had disappeared without a trace, leaving Robert devastated and confused. Florence was initially looked for in great detail. A thorough investigation was conducted by detectives from the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office, who searched every square inch of Montello and the surrounding regions. They looked through any accessible security footage and questioned everyone who had seen Florence that day. The inquiry reached a dead end, despite their best efforts. No one saw Florence, no evidence of foul play, and no hints as to what had happened to her. After a while, her case was abandoned and was filed away in the sheriff's office's archives. Florence vanished, and it was a mystery for years. Robert was left to suffer in silence, wondering what had become of his dear wife. Clinging to the recollections of their shared existence, he hoped that one day she might return. However, as time went on, that hope faded and was replaced with a profound sense of loss and resignation. Robert's life will never be the same even while the world continued on. In 2017, some decades later, the case took an unexpected turn. In the vicinity of the Catskill Mountains Resort, New York State Police senior investigator Jan Solomon discovered skeletal remains. It was a standard finding made as part of an unrelated inquiry. But Solomon was intrigued by something about the date and placement of the bones. Feeling strongly that these remnants could contain the solution to a long-forgotten enigma, he made the decision to go more. Solomon reopened Florence's case as a result of his inquiry. Even though he was aware of the slim chance, he couldn't get rid of the sensation that something was connecting. With hundreds of missing person cases in the U.S., identifying the remains would be an enormous undertaking. Comparing missing person reports to the skeletal remains, Solomon and his crew painstakingly went through data. Following several months of investigation, they came to the startling conclusion that Florence's social security number had been utilized in Massachusetts. Following this lead, Solomon discovered that Flora Harris, a resident of an assisted living home north of Boston, had been there since 2001. The revelation was perplexing as well as upsetting. Is Flora Harris the Florence Stevens who went missing? Solomon contacted Sullivan County Sheriff's Office Detective Rich Morgan because he desired answers. Equipped with an outdated work identification picture of Florence, Morgan set out to unravel the mystery at the institution. Morgan showed Flora the picture when they first met her, along with another investigator. To their surprise, Flora recognized herself right away. She remarked, pointing to the photo, "That's me." Even with dementia, she was able to recognize her husband's photo. At last, the enigma surrounding Florence Stevens' disappearance had been cleared out. It is true that Flora Stevens and Flora Harris were one and the same. The community and the investigation team were both shocked by this revelation. Still, Florence's disappearance's cause remained a mystery. Flora's dementia prevented any information regarding the years that were absent from being gleaned. The entire narrative of her disappearing act remained secret. The investigators could only put together bits and pieces from her memories, leaving everyone to ponder her life and the secrets she carried with her. Employees at the institution remembered Flora saying she was from a difficult marriage and her husband had been aggressive. This revelation added a layer of complexity to the mystery. Was Florence escaping a rough life? Was her purposeful disappearance to make a fresh start? These doubts persisted, but the truth remained unattainable in the absence of a cogent explanation from Flora. The case was declared closed even though there were no conclusive answers. Sheriff Mike Schiff said that Florence's tale was a credit to the detective's perseverance and determination, even though it is uncommon to solve a case involving a missing person that has been ongoing for decades. Even while it left many things unexplained, the decision gave the community closure on a matter that had plagued them for years. Florence Stevens's, now known as Flora Harris's, story became a moving reminder of the complexity of human existence and the mysteries that frequently lie just under the surface. Although her disappearance was shrouded in mystery, highlighted the tenacity of those who, for however long it took, steadfastly sought the truth. The story of the lady who went missing but was finally located became a Catskills legend throughout time, representing the strength of hope and the never-ending pursuit of justice. Florence's tale is ultimately about more than just a missing lady. It's a story about time passing, memories sticking with you, and searching for answers in an uncertain world. It acts as a reminder that there is always hope, even in the worst of circumstances, and occasionally, very occasionally, the solutions we seek are waiting to be found in the most unlikely locations. The twins Zoe and Mia Anderson had no idea what to expect when they chose to undergo a fun DNA test to find out more about their family history. The doctor yelled at them to contact legal counsel immediately after seeing the results. Zoe and Mia, twins, sat in their living room surrounded by relatives. The twins' next move into the big wide world was causing excitement and delight in the room. Subsequently, their mother approached the two and gave them an envelope that they had gotten in the mail. That was it. Only a few months previously, the girls had contributed their DNA as a harmless joke. They wanted to have some fun with the family by sharing what they discovered about their heritage. All eyes watched in fascination as they opened the envelope. They had no idea how strange the outcome would be. The twins laughed at the many nations that were showing up as they each examined their own results independently. But Zoe paused to check her twin sister's findings when Mia highlighted one that she didn't have. That's when she noticed something quite shocking. Zoe grabbed her sister's findings and proceeded to compare the two sets of information. Then she turned to face her parents, asking them if they were attempting to pull some horrible prank. The room instantly fell silent, almost to a whisper. Everyone was surprised by Zoe's unexpected eruption. What may be the issue? It was the first time they had heard her refer to her parents in that manner. Mia intervened and inquired about the nature of the issue. Zoe quickly demonstrated to her sister that the findings were not consistent. She read something that couldn't be true, but Mia responded rather differently from her sibling. Mia only chuckled, checking her mother's face to make sure it was all a joke, rather than snapping like Zoe did. Since she had delivered the letter to them, she must have tampered with it while they were attending the commencement. She felt her pulse race in her chest, though, as her parents responded with equal confusion. Zoe was boiling over. She demanded to know who was making fun of them by turning the room around. She proceeded to explain when everyone only returned her grave gaze. She explained to everyone why the outcomes didn't line up. She wasn't even biologically connected to Mia, much less twins, it seemed. The heavy silence that had descended on the room abruptly broke with these words. Confused, everyone was talking over each other. Amidst the noise, Mia's dad's voice could be heard. He said, "That can't be true. You two were delivered, I witnessed. I personally picked you two up from the nursery. Both of you are my daughters. The sample you supplied them must have had a problem." After Zoe made this statement, Mia became more composed. Their father was explaining everything. There was no need to draw any strange inferences at this point. They were sisters, of course. They had experienced existence together, both in their mother's womb and every other moment. It had been a mistake by someone. They decided to file a complaint by calling the ancestry tracing firm on Monday morning, and that was the end of it. Following then, the graduation ceremony proceeded with great happiness and festivity. That evening, everyone appeared to have forgotten the strange discoveries they had made earlier. Everyone but the twins, it seemed. On an individual basis, they were both replaying the situation in their heads, but they were obviously trying not to show their worry to anybody else, particularly not to each other. But that was only partially successful. That night, as she lay in bed, Mia couldn't get rid of the uneasy sensation she had. She needed to find out why something wasn't right. What were the possibilities that a globally recognized corporation would do such a terrible error? Silently rising, she tiptoed down the hallway to her sister's room. She slipped inside the room, assuming Zoe was still asleep. Indeed, her sister appeared rather anxious as she sat on her bed. They could tell one another's thoughts just by glancing at each other's faces. They were not going to let this pass them by. They both sensed that something wasn't quite right and that they needed to address it. A portion of them, meanwhile, wasn't even convinced they could rely on their parents. What if they had participated in a criminal enterprise? What would happen if one of them was taken by their father from the nursery? In the middle of the plot, Zoe interrupted Mia and informed her that their mother had been expecting twins. How could this be because they had seen the scanned pictures several times in their baby book over the years? What in the world was happening? Thankfully, they didn't need their parents' permission to visit the doctor because they were 18 years old. By simply going to their family doctor and requesting him to test their DNA, they planned to finally put an end to the dispute. Despite being taken aback to find the girls alone, Dr. Pond greeted them as he has many times in the past. But when they related the tale of their DNA test to him, his demeanor lightened with amusement. He believed they were attempting to deceive him. However, he immediately adjusted when he noticed that the female's emotions remained unchanged. After obtaining the girls' paperwork, he inquired about the girls' parents' comments. After that, he collected their hospital-issued pictures and birth certificates. Even though everything appeared proper and above board, he couldn't help but notice the girls' nervousness. He comforted them and promised to end their suffering as a result. To calm them down, he would do a quick DNA test and show them the findings. He was certain that some form of error had occurred. However, the doctor's delighted look shifted to one of anxiety when the girls returned to get the findings, only 2 days later. His expression of deep worry says it all. The girls had been correct all along. The DNA was mismatched. Sitting opposite the doctor, Zoe and Mia shivered with anxiety. What did all of this mean? What were they to do at this point? Their entire existence had been deceitful. If they had been misled their entire lives, how were they ever going to discover who they really were? After giving them a quick examination, Dr. Pond advised them to contact a lawyer right away. They would require it. Zoe made many calls in an attempt to find a family lawyer with experience in this field. She soon came across Michael, a well-known attorney who had previously handled several cases involving mixed-race children and lost children. He committed himself to solving the enigma. The parents of the girls were, of course, the first individuals interrogated. Naturally, their father was first very combative. However, he obliged when he understood that the attorney was only trying to resolve the matter for the sake of the girls. Finding out that his girls might not be his biological children wasn't easy, but he did his best to provide complete and accurate answers to his inquiries. Michael came to the conclusion that the parents were equally ignorant as the girls after having a lengthy conversation with them. To check if the girls' and the parents' DNA overlapped, he suggested that they undergo one more test. This would help them make sense of it all, and it was the finest counsel they had received thus far. The Anderson family immediately underwent more testing, and what they found was very terrifying. According to the test findings, Zoe and her father had very little DNA in common, but Mia had none at all. Michael made his first prediction right here. He was certain that Mia had been handed to the incorrect parents after being taken from the hospital. The parents were obviously furious. How on earth could this have occurred? I thought Mia was their daughter. Although she and Zoe were not identical twins, they shared the same appearance as their mother's daughters. Had they all spent 18 years blind? The family now had a very difficult position to deal with, but Michael did not falter. He was certain he could track the whole matter down to the hospital where they were born, should it turn out that Mia was not biologically linked to them. Not surprisingly, the hospital was quite frugal. No files from the year the girls were born were released by them. They denied giving it to their mother, even though she had given her consent. They attempted to hide by claiming that it was against the hospital's rights. Michael immediately went to the courts at this point and requested a subpoena for documents. This move then went on to accomplish something that nobody had predicted, causing an avalanche effect that nobody was ready for. Reluctantly, the hospital gave the girls' records and those of any other newborn delivered there at the same time to the public. The Andersons eagerly awaited word on whether anything valuable was contained in the files. They knew Michael had made a discovery when they saw his eyebrows lift. There had been 2 sets of African-American twins born that weekend, he revealed to the family as he placed 2 folders in front of them, and all 4 of the newborns had been females. What were the possibilities that the hospital had exchanged the newborns due to a serious administrative error or other negligent action? For Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, this was all too much. It appalled them to think that they had helped steal the kid of someone else, not to mention the fact that someone had left with their biological family. It was just too horrible. But Mia and Zoe were strong. They had vowed to be together no matter what came out of the inquiry since they loved one another so much. As soon as they opened the other twins' dossier, they were overcome with a strong urge to meet them. Michael was happy to oblige and encouraged the females to get together the next day at the hospital. Mia and Zoe felt everything would be well as soon as they caught eyes with Kayla and Tasha. The 4 of them shared a deep sense of familiarity that would be difficult to achieve even after many years of friendship. Kayla and Tasha didn't know why they were there, of course. They were recently informed by their parents that they would be seeing old pals. However, their instinct warned them that this wasn't the case when they spotted Mia and Zoe. They were simply aware. Mia was pulled to Tasha right away, while Zoe felt the same way about Kayla. Something about it seemed almost animalistic, that it lacked any kind of logic or explanation. The twins' parents watched in hysterics. How had this come to pass? How could they have missed it? Without delay, Michael requested further blood tests for every member of both families. After that, these were contrasted to determine the relationships. It was evident that not only were Zoe and Kayla twins, but also Mia and Tasha. Following these tangible results, the 2 families collaborated to look into the facility. They could not continue to put up with the egregious carelessness they had just encountered. As Michael got to work gathering information from his confidants and sources, he discovered some very unsettling things. Michael called Mrs. Anderson early on a Monday morning and asked to meet in a downtown courthouse to discuss an appeal. They obeyed, of course, and descended. However, they were met with a terrifying reality when they got there. African-American families with children of all ages filled the courtroom. The Anderson family moved on, perplexed, to look for Michael. When they arrived, he gave them an explanation of the macabre reality of what they were all seeing. As expected, the room was full of individuals who were just like the Andersons, families who had been handed the incorrect baby to take home for the previous 20 years. Zoe and Mia were in disbelief at what they saw. They could find no solace in the fact that they were not alone in experiencing such a horrible reality. Instead, they were highly upset. Imagine if the DNA test hadn't been conducted. Without it, none of those individuals would have ever learned the truth about themselves. How is that possible? How could a hospital with such a stellar reputation get away with such carelessness? As it happened, they had underestimated the extent of the situation. Michael and several other family lawyers challenged the hospital in court on their conclusions. They were committed to holding the facility to a high standard. They had destroyed generations of families. In other words, neither the Andersons nor any other family would be the same. Indeed, Mia and Zoe remained devoted to their parents, but Mia also shared her genetic makeup with another set of parents. Would they accept her demeanor despite the fact that it didn't resemble anyone in their family? Could they tell her anything about her great-grandparents, what they did, how her eye color came about? She, like with all the other missing children, found this to be completely unfamiliar. Over the 10 years that this crime had been committed, medical staff members underwent extensive interviews. The hospital even reached a stage where they desired to expose the offender. They didn't want to be associated with a scandal of that magnitude. It would be lots simpler to just place the responsibility elsewhere. Months passed throughout the trial. Throughout this time, the twins attended the same university as Tasha and Kayla. They made the decision to share a bunk together so they could get to know one another away from the drama. They were finding the legal struggle to be too much to handle at this point. Now that their world had been destroyed, all they wanted to do was go on living their lives and discover who they were. When they received a call back for a court date one day, their parents insisted that they go so they could finally get some closure. It was thought that they had located the one who had caused all of the suffering that the families had gone through. The twins noticed a middle-aged woman sitting on the stand as soon as they walked into the courtroom. Her face was scarred, and it spoke it all. This was one unhappy woman with an obviously cruel heart. She opened her nasty lips and spilled the truth when questioned. She gave a detailed account of how much she hated African Americans and how, when taking care of the infants in the nurseries, she had only witnessed hatred when the babies screamed. She had made fun of them, and the mother had merely encouraged the mom's suffering with fictitious painkillers when they had experienced it. If anybody had ever seen a horror nurse, this one was it. It was obvious that she was psychologically disturbed. She explained how, whenever she had the opportunity, she had deliberately switched every African American kid for another, all while laughing like a hyena. She thought her scheme was the most cunning yet. She called the courtroom audience foolish for taking so long to realize that their children were not really their own, and she made fun of them for it. The judge abruptly stopped the nurse at this point and asked for quiet. Naturally, this greatly upset the crowd. Dads were shouting and mothers sobbing at the injustices they had to face. The nurse's admission stunned the Andersons as they sat there. Zoe and Mia were both unable to comprehend such hostility. How could a mature lady treat infants with such cruelty? How did they alter her? But they soon forgot about their animosity for her. Who could be hostile to a lady so full of hatred? She definitely didn't need anyone else to tell her how disgusting she already was. In addition, she was forced to live solely in her head. And now that Michael and his group had done so, she would have to do so for an extended period of time while incarcerated. The media was slammed with the news like never before. At the forefront were Mia and Zoe, as reporters quickly explained how their narrative had sparked such a significant probe. The girls' mother often brought up their good deeds, even though they detested being the center of attention and avoided it at all costs. She also emphasized to them that nothing could ever take away from the fact that they were related. If anything, this terrible circumstance taught them that family is much more than just a biological relationship. Mia and Zoe would always be sisters, and their parents their guardians, regardless of what the findings of the DNA test revealed. Given how long it has been that way, why would they alter it now? Naturally, the fact that they were adults and could thus lawfully seek out and get to know their missing family members did assist. In the end, rather of growing their family, they were expanding it greatly. The girls expressed their gratitude to Michael and Dr. Pond for all of their assistance. After all, these two guys helped them realize how accurate their intuition was, even when everyone else was advising them to reject their gut instinct. Not only had they unraveled the riddle inside their own family, but they had also put an injustice that had lasted far too long to rights. What a startling tale! If a DNA test revealed that you were not truly connected to your family, how would you respond? Do you believe the parents were aware of the switch at all? Leave a comment below to let us know. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.